Hello everyone in YouTube land, musical theater YouTube land. Emily Clark here. So I haven't made a video in a while. This past month I've been really busy with the Hollywood Fringe Festival. A lot of us in the LA area are very fringy during June, so I haven't had time to make videos. So I thought I would kind of just do a little vlog right now on the fly. So I just have my phone up and I have a list that I've been wanting to do for a while. And this is the list of musicals that have made me cry. I'm an okay crier. I'm not like weepy at everything, but I'm also not like a stone cold hard ass either. This is my personal list. Shows that I have a very vivid memory of seeing and being affected by. So I have 7 musicals because that's all I could think of. I'm sure there are more, but these are my top 7 musicals that have made me cry. Okay, here we go. Number 7. Rent, 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 when I gonna pay rent? 'Cause everything is rent. So Rent is interesting for me because it's like looking at my baby pictures. I was very obsessed with this show when it first came out in the mid-90s, when I was like 13, 14, 15, basically through my entire teen years. I was very obsessed with Rent. I lived in California, so I didn't get to see it on Broadway till my first trip to New York a few years later, but I saw both of the tours that came out in LA, and the one that I have the most vivid memory of crying at was the tour that Daphne Rubin Vega was in. I think it was 99. I was in 11th grade and we went to the Schubert Theater in LA, which doesn't exist anymore, me and my friends. And we had seats in the balcony for the first act. And then in the second act, we moved down to the orchestra. Brash kids. I remember adults around us being like, no, don't be annoying now. And we so were. But I remember Daphne Rubin Vega was just this force. Like, she was just so powerful. And when she was doing Goodbye Love, she looked like she was going to eat Roger's face off. It was amazing. And I got really emotional. All the parts when you're supposed to get emotional, you know, Seasons of Love and, well, Seasons of Love, the reprise. And at the end, yeah, I was just a mess. And after the show was my first time ever stage dooring. I don't really like stage dooring very much. I think I don't like it as an actor, and I don't really like doing it as an audience because I feel like, ugh, you're just trying to live your life. But at the time, you know, I was in high school, so I had my Rent book, and we saw Daphne Rubin Vega at the door, and she signed it in a gold pen. She wrote, "Much love, Emily," or something like that. So I still have it. Very, very precious memory to me. I don't really listen to Rent very much nowadays. As I've gotten older, I kind of see the more problematic elements to it. And it was written in the 90s. It was just a very different time than the world we live in now. So but I still know every word. I watched Rent live. We did a vlog on it. I'm one of the few people, I think, who actually really liked the changes they made. I feel like the book has a lot of problems that never got fixed because Jonathan Larson died. So I really liked that version. And I cried when I watched it. Even though I know everything that's gonna happen, even though I'm a jaded adult, I still cried when Brandon Victor Dixon did Seasons of Love reprise. So, what can I say? It's this time of my life when it meant so much to me, and I just look back at that time. And I teach kids now, and it's so fun when I see high schoolers who get obsessed with Rent now, because I just remember that feeling so well. And I wish I could tell them, that show is not really what being an adult is like, but it's good enough. Number 6. Carousel. Okay, so Carousel is a very problematic show. It has not aged well. I kind of can't believe they did a revival just a few years ago, like a year or 2 ago. So let me just take you back. Let me give you a little history here. So when I was like a preteen tween, you know, that's that time when kids usually start getting into music. They start discovering their parents' music, you know, like the Beatles or something, or they start getting into the new bands coming out, the "You Don't Understand My Music" dad music. And you know, I listened to the radio and to pop music and top 40, but I never really had that phase when I was a kid. I kind of got into that stuff older when I was in college. When I was a kid, my thing was to discover old musicals. My mom taught a musical theater summer program, and it would be a review that would be on a certain theme, whether that's a genre of musicals or a certain set of composers. So the first year we did Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we did a review of the big five: Oklahoma, Carousel, King and I, South Pacific, Sound of Music. And that's when that summer, it was like 96 or something, I just spent that whole summer kind of getting obsessed with Rodgers and Hammerstein. I watched all the movies, I learned all the history, I learned about the shows, and I got really into them. And then there was that big revival of Carousel in the 90s that Audra McDonald was in. She won her first Tony for playing Carrie Pipperidge. I think it was 95, I could be wrong. It was in the mid-90s. And I think it started in London, and then it moved out to Broadway, and it was, I think, the first revival since the original, and that was a big major production. And so it toured in California at the Amundsen, so it wasn't the original cast, but it was the first time I'd seen it on stage and not the movie version. And I knew most of what was going to happen, but I remember what struck me the most is that in the movie version of Carousel, Billy falls on his knife. And in the stage show, he makes this cop-out decision to just be like, guess I'll die now, and kills himself with his wife pregnant. He's a great guy. And when I saw that on stage, and then watching Julie, you know, watch him die, and then having Cousin Nettie come out and sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," I mean, forget about it. It was like full racking, heaving sobs. I'm not going to say that you should like Carousel. It's got a lot of problems, the biggest of which is kind of the forgiving of domestic abuse, or explaining away of it. I think the show very intentionally makes Billy an anti-hero, if you will, even though that wasn't really, like, I guess a term then, but he's not supposed to be a good guy, but then in the end, it's kind of forgiven. So I think there are problems. What's the Use of Wonderin' is a garbage song. But I can't lie, like, it's one of my favorite Rodgers and Hammerstein scores. That opening overture, the Carousel Waltz, every time it gives me goosebumps. Every time. I can't not feel it. You'll Never Walk Alone kills me. Louisa's story in the second act, her ballet. You know, when I was a kid, I remember being like, what's her actual problem? Like, her dad is dead, but like, what's her problem? And I look back now and I think, oh, she's a teenager. It's hard to be a teenager. It just is. It hits me harder even now, I would say, because I work with kids and I remember what it's like to be a kid, and I just go, yeah, I remember that feeling of like, no one understands me, I gotta dance it out. But that production, that revival production, was one of the youngest weeping in the theater memories I have. Just being there with my mom and just completely letting the music wash over me and these big emotions. If you don't like it, that's fine. You might want to just like listen to some of the songs. And for nothing else, you know, if nothing else, it gave us Leslie Uggams doing June is Busting Out all over. So, and the Huck and the Bejeepers and the Little Bitty Dredgers. She's the best. Number 5. Way down, Hades town, way down under the ground.
A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Way
down, Hades town, way down under the ground. This is a newer one. This is definitely the newest one on my list. I just saw it in New York on Broadway. Did a whole review of it. It's one of my favorite things I've ever seen. I didn't know anything about the show going in except that it's Orpheus and Eurydice, that was it, a modern telling of the myth. I purposely kind of didn't want to listen to anything. And everything about the show affected me, and it's just a testament to them because you know how the show's going to end. It's the Orpheus and Eurydice myth. There's only one way for it to end. She's got to go back down. And when Andre de Shields came out and he's singing right after she gets sucked back down, and he's singing that it's an old song, it's a sad song, but we tell it anyway.
Because here's the thing. To know how it ends and still begin to sing it again. As if it might turn out this time.
And that like hit me in the face. The idea of the power of storytelling and why it's so important. And why it's important to tell these same myths over and over again. And then just the cast overall. I would say the romance between Hades and Persephone probably hit me more. There's this moment in the show, it's near the end, where Hades is, forgive me if I'm not explaining it right, Hades is big climax moment, and Orpheus is kind of playing his melody, trying to get him to remember what it's like to feel love for Persephone, and then like the red flower just appeared in his hand, and you hear the audience go, and oh my God, and you see Persephone like getting so emotional, and that got me so hard. I like the simplicity of it. It's not, and that's not to say it's not intricate or well thought out, but the idea that so much of the music is meant for people to join in and sing along, like you would in a bar, because a lot of the show takes place in a bar. So that kind of communal singing with the people you love thing, which is something I think most of us can relate to, especially if you grew up in a music family. You know, my parents are in a bluegrass band. The jams at our house are nothing new. So that whole thing always kind of gets me. So Hadestown just won the Tony Award for like everything. If you can see it on Broadway, do. I'm sure there are going to be tours. And one of the great things I loved about that show is that it's going to have a great afterlife. Because you can do it in a huge space on a Broadway stage, but you could also do it in a black box. You could do it as a concert version. You could, dare I say it, maybe they'll even make like a high school version at some point. They could. It's simple enough of a story. Yeah, it's a wonderful show. It made me cry real hard in the best way. It was like smiling, crying, just like that kind of thing. Okay. Number 4. Sunny in the Park with George.
On a Sunday in the park with...
Don't move the mouth!
Yeah, this show, I guess I like the shows that are about the nature of storytelling and the creation of art, the artist making the art. I don't know, I guess they hit me in a relatable way. Sunday in the Park with George is, it waffles between a few, but Sunday in the Park with George is always in my top 3 musicals ever. Definitely in my top 2 Sondheims. But it's one of my favorite musicals ever. The PBS version with Mandy Patinkin and Bernadette Peters is the one I've seen the most. Back in 2002, 03, I went with my best friend to Washington, D.C. so we could see the Sondheim celebration at the Kennedy Center. We were those musical theater kids. So Ryan Scott Oliver, I'll put his thing up there, wherever. I never know which side it's going to be on. And that was the first time I had seen it live on stage. And that production starred Raul Esparza as George and Melissa Errico as Dot. And that production definitely made me cry. Raul Esparza was so different than Mandy Patinkin. He made him a little more youthful, which makes sense considering the guy was 30-something when he died. But I can rewatch. I just showed my fiance the Mandy and Bernie version, and I still wept at the same places I always do. This one makes me cry it's really kind of like the music, the score that makes me cry more than anything, because I know the lines so well now, and the story so well now. It's really listening. Well, it's two particular moments. There is the resolution in the title song, Sunday. It's at the end of the first act and at the end of the second act, but the first act one is the one that gets me the most. When they do on, I'll play it. I'll play it right here. But it's the on an ordinary Sunday. Ba 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 ba. On an ordinary Sunday. And then there are these chords, and they're all really dissonant and clashing. It goes boom, boom, boom. And then there's like one pure note that goes ding and resolves it. And then it goes back to the themes. And it's like, because Sondheim's just a genius. It's this musical representation of the whole, well, of all the words that George is saying through the show. Order, design, chaos, harmony. There's more of them. But talking about how all these elements come together in this weird way to create this beautiful piece of art. And that's what I feel is happening in the score at that point. And it hits me in that place where you can't really describe it. That place that music hits you. That goosebumps place, that like all of a sudden like, why am I crying place? There's also, and I think this is Mandy specific, good old Mandy. But there's the part in the song Move On where he goes, and the feeling and the life moving on. It's that Mandy. And the life. And the life moving on. Like just thinking about it right now is kind of getting me a little choked up. I don't know, that moment and the life moving on and him hitting it on that beautiful like Mandy note. Just, God, it's so good. The whole score is really wonderful. I feel like if you're an artist in any capacity, you will relate to it, especially if you're a producer. If you're the one on the outside, like constantly just making stuff and having that take precedence. Like Finishing the Hat really gets me too. And then there's stuff like Putting It Together, which is so relatable and funny. The idea of having to network and schmooze. It's a fantastic show. I think it really has only gotten better as I've gotten older. So I highly recommend, and you will cry. Number 3. Welcome to Amsterdam, Amsterdam. I don't think the title is in a song. It's Passing Strange. Passing Strange.
You can trip all day till your mind just melts. Makes Berkeley look like the Bible Belt.
So this is another one about what it means to be an artist. I saw this before it went to Broadway at the Public. I saw it twice. My friends were visiting. I was living in New York at the time, and my friends worked at the Berkeley Rep where it started. And so they were coming into town to see its pre-Broadway transfer, off-Broadway transfer. So they asked me if I wanted to come. So I did. And another show where I didn't really know anything of what was going to happen before I saw it. And I was obsessed with this show for a really long time. I was a mess. I wept. And it's probably not at the place where you're going to think. So the mother character is a big role in the show. And she dies near the end. This image of her comes back, created by Stu, the guy who's the main character. Daniel Breaker is playing the young version of him. And then Stu is on the stage too. You think it's going to be a moment where he's like, I should have gone home. I should have realized. I should have been there. And instead he has this thing where he says, no, I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I'm gonna play in bars, I'm gonna sleep in cars, I'm gonna live this life, because she knew that's who I was.
I'll live in vans crammed with guitars. I'll sleep on floors and play in bars.
And she's watching him proud when it happens. And that point, it just took a different direction than I thought it was going to take. And so for me, it kind of sucker punched me, and then I just was a mess. It's such a great show. It did like the people of color portraying white people thing before Hamilton did it. And it's ironic because Passing Strange was up against In the Heights. And it's like, how do you go up against In the Heights? It was one of those shows where, you know, it's the chorus line in Chicago thing again. Like, you can't go, it doesn't matter how good your show is. If you're going up against a chorus line, you know, you're not going to win. Same with Hamilton. And that was kind of how it was with In the Heights a few years before that. But it's such a good show, you guys. There's a DVD version that Spike Lee filmed of the Broadway version, but I can't really tell you how cool it was to be in the public, which is pretty much like a thrust stage, like a semicircle audience. So they were the audience. You were very much like part of the show, and the band is on the stage and around the stage. So everyone kind of felt together. But it's also just great seeing these amazing character performers. Rebecca Jones is in it, and she was so good. Just not dressing them up at all. They're just kind of in black. And then, you know, there's Deidre Aziza. I think I said her name right. I'm so sorry if I forgot. I'm saying that off the top of my head. She was nominated for the Tony, and she played a gal named Mariana in the show. And she's just like a white girl from Amsterdam, but she's a black actress. And it's just kind of treated as such. And that's the cool thing I really love about theater, is that you really don't have to explain stuff like that. We get it. We can get your audience, if they're smart, which, you know, sometimes they're not. The idea of the artist's journey and struggling to find his place in the world is important. And I liked that the show didn't back away from that it wasn't like, you should have just stayed home with mom. Because that's not any better either. You have to be happy with yourself. Number 2. Alexander Hamilton. Yeah, you knew this was coming.
How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman?
This was a big one. I know the soundtrack inside and out. I've seen bootlegs online. I have the Hamiltome, the book. I know the show fairly well, and yet I was wholly unprepared for how much the end of Hamilton affected me. I saw it on tour in LA. The cast was phenomenal. And just, it was the last stuff with Eliza. It just, just the idea of your legacy, you know, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, but also that she has the last word in the show, that she lived this whole life. I think it's really the gasp, the last, I hear that that's what it's supposed to be. She always does this big gasp at the end of the show, and it's supposed to be like her dying breath. And that, I don't know, that really got to me. I don't even think I could explain why it got to me. Just the idea that she's going to see him again, and she was like about to see him, and her life ended right as the show ended, or, you know, metaphorically. It was so powerful. And the whole show, I mean, so much of the stuff with Aaron Burr, I wept when, oh my God, when the son died. Wept. Another Eliza moment, Eliza's scream. I think we had an understudy Eliza too, and she was amazing. Yeah. Oh, Philip. Yeah, that's the character's name. Yeah, when Philip died, you know it's coming, and still it's just awful. And then when Eliza holds Alexander's hand for the first time in the It's Quiet Uptown, it's not just sad. It's like stuff that I don't think I would have gotten if I was a little younger. It's these kind of lived experiences, the idea that you can forgive someone after something so tragic. And then there's stuff in the score that just makes me cry. Like the harmonies and the way the music builds and the repeating of themes. Lin-Manuel Miranda is so good at that, having like certain themes for his characters that, you know, he doesn't even really call attention to them. It's almost subconscious. And so you hear certain songs when certain characters are around, and it just gets to me. Yeah, it makes you proud to be an American at a time where it's not fun. So if you want to feel like patriotic, I mean, give it a listen. Go see it. I do recommend listening to it before you see it because it's so dense with information that a lot of it could go by really fast. So when you see it live, you're running on a lot of emotion, but a lot of the lyricism might go past you. Okay, here we go. The #1 musical that has made me cry the most. Ragtime. Oh my, this show. So I saw it. This is another one that I saw in the 90s. I saw the tour in LA, and I knew the soundtrack, another one that I listened to a lot and knew really well. But to this day, I think it is the most I have cried watching a piece of art in one sitting. I cried in all the obvious places, like Till We Reach That Day, Your Daddy's Son, Make Them Hear You. But then I was even crying really hard, racking sobs at parts like Gliding, like when Tata gets back with his little daughter after like a moment of her being like, Daddy, Daddy, and he gets her back, and then he sings this little song. I was so affected by it. I love Ragtime so much, but it's one of those shows that like I love so much, and it put me through so much when I saw it that it's hard for me to see productions now. I can listen to it. I can watch like clips on YouTube of like Wheels of a Dream. But going through the experience of watching it would be quite a lot. But I still love it so much. There's been a lot of productions of it in LA lately. There was a big one at the Pasadena Playhouse, and then there's one at the Chance Theater in Anaheim right now. Well, it's telling all these stories that just could be happening today. You know, one of our main, Audra won her 3rd Tony for Ragtime, and there's, you know, she gets killed at the end of the first act by police because they think her hand is a gun. It's awful. There's also stuff like the fact that Marin Mazzie was in the original Broadway cast and she's gone now. So when I listen to her sing Back to Before, it just gets me in a different way now. It's such a powerful show. It's an important show. It's a relevant show. It's one of the most American musicals I can think of in terms of like really portraying both sides of our history. I highly recommend Ragtime. Just get that original Broadway cast. Everyone in it is just insane. And it'll make you cry. Go see it if you can. It's another one that a lot of people are trying to deconstruct right now. So there might be some black box productions or regional theater productions. It is a fantastic show to hear when you have a full orchestra, though, because, oh my God, it's just so lush. It's yet another one where just the music takes me over and just kind of affects me in ways I can't explain. So that's it. Those are my top musicals that have made me cry. Do they stack up to your musicals? I know there was no Phantom, no Boublil in Schoenberg. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I like what I like. And the things that make me cry are the things that make me cry. I'm a snooty patootie Sondheim girl.